Ron DeSantis is closing in on Nikki Haley's recent comment in New Hampshire that the state's role is to correct Iowa in the presidential nominating process. Here now to break down the Florida governor's latest campaign strategy in Iowa is the DeSantis deputy campaign manager. He's back, David Polyansky. Thank you for joining us again, David. You're a great guest to have here. So tell us, this whole, we're 3 or 4 days away. We just talked to a Trump representative, Eric Branstad, just like last time. And he's very, very confident it's going to be a blowout. You believe differently. And will the exit of Chris Christie affect the metrics in Iowa for DeSantis?
Well, first, Eric, thank you for having me. It's always great to be on here and appreciate the opportunity. Well, look, I think Eric lays out a great case. I think the Trump campaign is trying to make the argument that a 12-point win or 13-point win in Iowa for the former president would be historic. But we've never seen in an Iowa caucus, or frankly, this kind of primary process, is an incumbent former president, somebody that's been a nominee 2 times over and aiming for his 3rd time to be our party's nomination. So, look, this is going to be a long, hard slog. We were always an underdog. We will continue to be an underdog. But in Iowa, into New Hampshire, into Nevada and South Carolina, and then into March, we're just going to grind this out because you know what? The mainstream media has written our, pre-mortems, as we call them, over and over and over again. We're just playing with house money. We're going to go out there, be loose, outwork the competition, out-organize them, and drive this thing into March.
Last night there was a debate on CNN. Take a listen to DeSantis calling Haley on why she wouldn't just say no about something. Listen.
Nikki is becoming a darling of the people who are more than ever Trump. And yet, she won't answer the question about whether she would accept the VP nod. And she gives all these mealy-mouthed response. What's wrong with just saying, no, I would not under any circumstances say that. And I think the fact that she has not done that is part of the reason Chris had been staying in. And I think that's part of the reason I think he's had those choice words.
Do you think she would agree to be vice president?
I do.
Trump?
I do.
So, David, do you think really that's what she's playing for, VP?
Well, I do. And look, Nikki Haley had another very subpar and tough night on the debate stage last night. She got her clock cleaned. If I were advising her, I'd give her one simple debate prep tip, and maybe we'll get her next week in New Hampshire to do this. The answer is no. She's being funded by tens of millions of dollars by Wall Street executives, by the very folks that consider themselves to be never Trump. And yet here she is refusing to that same group, those people that are funding her to attack Ron DeSantis with tens of millions of dollars, and frankly, to attack, now Donald Trump in New Hampshire. And yet she can't answer that simple question. I would suspect those folks up there have a lot of buyer's remorse today, not just because she won't say no, but because of her terrible performance on the stage last night.
So Dave, may I ask you, of course, DeSantis he spent a lot of time in Iowa. He didn't spend much time in New Hampshire, but spent a lot of time in Iowa. He was doing very well relative to the rest of the field besides Trump. But that flipped recently. It looks like some of the polling shows Haley may have overtaken DeSantis, your guy, in Iowa. What do you think that's attributed to, and do you think those polls are wrong?
Well, look, first, Nikki Haley is the biggest spender in Iowa by a pretty wide margin at this point. She spent over $20 million alone hammering Ron DeSantis here in the state with negative false ads. And so, look, that stuff matters and it does impact the race. But let me say this. When we head into Monday night, the temperature is still slated to be about minus 17 degrees here in Des Moines and probably a little colder in the northwest part of the state. You're going to have an organization in place to get your people out in those kind of conditions. But there's also a second part of that, Eric, and you rightly pointed out. Governor DeSantis has been all over the state. And when folks are deciding whether they show up to caucus or not that night and who they're going to decide, to support in those temperatures and in those tough conditions, every person that goes to caucus that night will have had the chance or may have met Ron DeSantis, been able to ask Ron DeSantis a question, shake his hand, and get their picture with him. He's the only candidate that can say that, and we're very optimistic that will pay off, by the way, not just in Iowa, but ultimately in places like South Carolina, too.
Here's my question. Will Ron DeSantis be on the ticket, on the ballot on Super Tuesday?
He will,
no matter what.
And I'll give
no
you,
matter what happens in the
first
3.
I'll give you a couple predictions. You could take these to the bank. Number one, Nikki Haley, once she loses significantly in South Carolina on February 24th, on February 25th, she will be dropping out of the race, and we will be back to that two-person race we've been talking about all along. But next, we are slated to be in New Hampshire next week, and in fact, have an ABC WMUR debate on the books, Eric, actually a week from tonight. And yet Nikki Haley's the one that has been unwilling to accept that debate challenge. And frankly, after last night's pummeling, after last night's pummeling, you can see why.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, David, and Nikki Haley, she's been on the show. She was my governor for a long time. She won't come back. She won't go back because I called her out on a harebrained idea that she had about making anything you post on the internet has to somehow be tied to your identification. I thought it was insane. I'm a libertarian. I hated it. I mentioned it. She wouldn't even give us someone like yourself, someone who represents the Haley campaign, to have a conversation. You can't have that thin of a skin and expect to be the president of the free world, literally. David Polyansky, good luck.
Eric, thank you.
We're gonna have to leave it there. We'll get you back again very soon, David. Thank you. All right.